And Stone Jesus was just so different than anything I was listening to at the time. And so that album, I can't overstate its importance. I've said things like it saved my life. I think it really did. Hey, this is Sean from the Heavy Underground Farm Report. I also do some work as Bubba Hufford Field for Clean and Sober Stoner. I do my Heavy Underground Crop Report over there. But man, I wanted to do something a little different today. I'm not going to talk to a band or tell you my top 5 albums this year yet, but I do want to talk about some of my favorite albums and how they've correlated to my life, and in particular, my sobriety. So I quit drinking 9 years ago. My anniversary was just a couple months ago. Um, but, quitting drinking was just the first step. I quit drinking, but still 5 years later, I felt very disconnected still. I was very depressed. A lot of anxiety. Right around that time, I was hit by a pickup truck and sustained some pretty severe injuries. I broke my hip and my pelvis and my femur, then ribs on both sides and my shoulder, and dislocated my knee. And during my recovery, I contracted MRSA and had to have a PICC line into my heart. And I had to have it there for 6 weeks. And so I have some post traumatic stress as well from that incident, as you could probably imagine. Man, during this period, it was the first time I might have had some feelings about going back and starting drinking again. And I was depressed, like I said. I was laid up in bed and I needed to do something different. Someone suggested that I take psychedelic drugs. I'm not recommending this to anyone else by any means, but that's what I did. I got a hold of some mushrooms and I started taking doses of psychedelic mushrooms, not microdoses either. Good hefty doses. And then during this period, I started putting myself in my room in the dark and listening to super heavy, doomy stoner rock. And the first time that in a long time, I should say, that I really was listening to music again. And it was cathartic. I found this music to be very healing. So today I wanted to talk about not just focus on the psychedelics, although I found them very useful in my recovery. I think I might have gotten over my depression a lot quicker had I had proper psychiatric care and therapy, but I really was in a bad financial situation. I didn't really have the money for that. So, man, I desperately found some way to recover, and that's what I chose. But anyway, I really want to focus on the albums that I was listening to, because these albums, I think, are really what healed me more than the drugs did. So, let's start talking about them. The first band that I really started listening to when I was taking mushrooms was Spaceslug. And this album in particular, Omanus. I also listened to a lot of Memorial. Spaceslug hit me in a different way that most rock bands. It was doomy and drony and atmospheric. And I felt like literally I was traveling through space, when I was listening to Spaceslug. And I don't know what it was exactly, but after the first couple times I listened to Spaceslug, I felt better. Calmer, less anxiety. Talked to some people, and they told me that low tones are healing, and I still don't understand exactly how that works in my brain, but I know it seemed to work. So I continued on down that path, and I discovered this band here, IAH from Argentina. And their music is a lot cleaner than most stoner doom. It's not as heavily distorted, especially in the slower parts. And they capitalize on that by having these really clean parts and crashing in with heavy, distorted, jammy sections of their songs. They're mostly instrumental. Like, I felt like changed my brain a little bit, It was cerebral and smart, and the guitar playing was amazing. And so, this thing seemed to be working, taking psychedelic drugs and locking myself in my bedroom and listening to heavy stoner rock. So Spaceslug and IAH. And then the next band that I really got into was Monolord, man. And this album, Rust, freaking love this album. The wet vocals, man, they were trippy, So I'm tripping, and I'm listening to the words of Rust, and it's speaking to my heart. And the way the music is recorded, the drums are fantastic. Man, Monolord, much like IAH and Spaceslug, very atmospheric band for me. But the wet vocals were something new, and I really enjoyed that. And I think it took me to a different place. And I think that also probably switched up some neural pathways for me. But man, I was feeling better. This is a couple months into doing this, and I'm doing it pretty regularly, like every weekend or every other weekend at least. My anxiety's starting to wane a bit, and my depression's starting to go away a little bit as well. I'm not very social at this point in my life. I'm spending a lot of time working and going home. But I'm feeling better, man. I'm feeling like, I started going to shows again, and I went and saw this band actually, Earthless, and Earthless is where they got me back into collecting records, man. I bought not this album, but Night Parade of 100 Demons at their show. But Earthless is pretty maybe an obvious choice for psychedelic jammy kind of I'm taking mushrooms kind of and trying to feel better about life. This album was first for me, and man, it cheered me up. Like there's something about Isaiah Mitchell's guitar playing that was more hopeful than a lot of the other doomy stuff I was listening to, and it hit me in a different way. And I think at that point in my life, a couple months into doing this, I was starting to feel joy again in my life. And I think through the dark music somehow I rediscovered that. But Earthless was happy right out of the bags. It was long. It was I could float away and disappear listening to it. Took me to places I wanted to go, and so Earthless now entered the picture, and the dark doomy stuff is brightened a little bit perhaps with Earthless. But when it comes down to the albums I was listening to, I think the most important album for me, without a doubt, the album that I spent the most time listening to and had a profound effect on me, not just through the music, but through the lyrics as well, is this album right here. I I love this album, man. Seven Thunders Roar by Stone Jesus. Like Bright Like the Morning and I Am the Mountain in particular. And they spoke to me. Like, I mean, I'm tripping heavily, and like I remember tripping one time and listening to I Am the Mountain and feeling like I was on that mountain, and I, disappeared from my room and I was, maybe somewhere Tibetan. And I don't know, it was a heavy trip, but it changed my outlook on myself a lot. I spent a lot of time in AA, and AA really stresses killing your ego. And at this point, that had become a really depressing message to me. So I was in a position of rebuilding some of my ego. I think some of you have some egos important in your life. You read about, I just want to go through life as an observer. Well, I don't. I want to be a participant too. I want to be quiet enough to notice things. I wanted to have fun again, and I wanted to smile, and I wanted to enjoy things. And I Am the Mountain in that way, in some way, conveyed that message to me. And Stone Jesus was just so different than anything I was listening to at the time. And so that album, I can't overstate its importance. I've said things like it saved my life. I think it really did, certainly in conjunction with changing my brain patterns, that music gave me a different outlook on my life. And there were other albums that I was listening to at the time too that were important. I like things slow and low and long, songs. I was obviously listening to sleep and, well, like, this was a big one for me because I'm a dope smoker. And, some people might contest my sobriety. I do enjoy smoking cannabis. It's a mood stabilizer for me. It helps me sleep. It stimulates my appetite. I like smoking weed and relaxing. And part of me always liked some sort of escape. It just couldn't be alcohol anymore because alcohol was so destructive to my relationships and physically and mentally destructive to me. And I just don't have the same concerns with smoking weed. So sleep is, I love sleep. The music being low and slow and riffy, man. Cathartic. Once again, super helpful music. I mean, obviously, Caius is part of this, a huge part of this equation. Fu Manchu as well. These bands are classic stoner rock bands, and of course, I was listening to those bands. And I listened to, like, I got into later Earthless stuff even after I stopped doing mushrooms regularly. So I still listen to a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's what I listen to. And I think if you're struggling with addiction or you're struggling with depression, I'm once again not going to recommend psychedelic drugs, but I will recommend the music. It somehow really, man, spoke to me in a way that I can't understand. But something about listening to low, slow, and heavy music that makes me feel better. So, man, check out some Earthless. This album last year was a good one for me, and then the Freak Folk of Mangrovia. doomy and atmospheric and heavy as fuck. Maybe, but the music is really what like keeps me going on that one. And then, like atmospheric stuff. So El Supremo is something you should check out if you haven't listened to El Supremo. This album is fucking fantastic, and Acid Plant's great, man. I think I got the name right. And then last year Momo Voodoo had this album out, and Matt Watkins is a great guy and he's a positive guy, and this album is dark and doomy and cathartic as hell. I always feel better after I listen to some Momo Voodoo. And then from Seattle, this band also dark but yet light is Museum of Light. I mean, I absolutely love this album, Diviner. It's great. It's modern. It's new. It's heavy. Smart songwriting. It's badass. And this is the kind of music that's helping keep me sober. It's helped keeping me happy. It's making my brain function better. So, I just wanted to share some of these albums and some of my experiences since I've quit drinking. Sobriety has been the best period of my life. I've never had more fun. I've never felt more engaged. And of course, I have to credit the psychedelics. I mean, I know they reprogram me in some way, and I'm not recommending anybody else do that, but I'm glad they helped change my life to a more positive and productive life. And so, man, thanks for tuning in. This is Sean from the Heavy Underground Farm Report, Bubba Huffifield from Clean and Sober Stoner, and I hope y'all have a great day. And if you're having a problem with addiction, the first step is reaching out and talking to somebody, man. There's all kinds of resources. And if you drop me a line, man, I'd be happy to talk to you too. So hang in there. Have a great day. Remember what's important in life. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah!